Hello everyone, welcome to today's story. What would you do if the person you once loved returned, not with love in their eyes, but with threats on their lips? What if your past came knocking, demanding money, and even threatening to take your child? In this story, Tuna's ex-husband, drowning in debt, will stop at nothing to get what he wants. But when his desperation turns into danger, a man named Alex steps in, changing everything. Will Alex be able to protect Tuna from the shadows of her past? Or will her ex-husband's threats push her life into chaos once more? Stay until the end to witness every twist, every silent glance, and every choice that could change their fate forever. And if you enjoy stories filled with emotion, suspense, and heart, don't forget to subscribe to help us reach our goal of 1,000 followers. Your support means the world. The afternoon light spilled weakly through the cracked shutters, painting thin, trembling lines across his worn-out table. His phone vibrated again. Another number he knew too well. The voice on the other end was sharp, impatient, laced with a threat that pressed against his chest like a blade. Pay up, or we'll come to your house. He rubbed his temples, the taste of stale coffee still on his tongue, and stared at the small pile of lottery tickets scattered across the floor. Debt was a weight that bent his back lower every day. Every number he had bet on had slipped past him, like fish darting out of reach in murky water. His mind raced, pulling at frayed strings of possibility. The only door left ajar in this collapsing hallway of options was his mother. She still had the land papers, his last bargaining chip. He imagined her face, lined with the quiet years of tending their small home, and his stomach twisted. She would resist, of course. She would see through the confident smile he'd force onto his face. But desperation was louder than pride. He could wrap his plea in the language of opportunity, tell her about the good business just within reach, about the money that could change everything. Outside, the sky was turning the color of ash. The streets hummed with the dull rhythm of everyday life. But inside him, the clock was ticking faster, each second tightening the rope around his neck. He picked up his coat, the decision already made. Today, he would trade his mother's trust for a chance at escape. The old wooden gate creaked as he stepped into the yard, the air carrying the faint scent of damp earth and boiled tea. His mother was seated on the porch, her hands busy peeling a small basket of peanuts, eyes narrowing the moment she saw him. She had known this knock before, always arriving with a shadow. He sat close, wearing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Words rolled out smoothly, polished by urgency. Mom, I've found a business. Solid, promising. All I need is a bit of capital. We can double it in no time. She paused, her fingers still on the shell, the crack of peanut skin the only sound between them. Her answer was as steady as her gaze. We've been through enough. I won't gamble the house. But he leaned in, weaving pictures of brighter days, new walls, a safer roof, money flowing like spring water. He called it an opportunity, but in truth, it was his last card. The dusk deepened, swallowing the edges of the yard. He spoke of profits, of certainty, of how nothing could go wrong. She listened, her silence stretching like an old rope, fraying under the pull of love and worry. Finally, she stood, the decision heavy in her movement, and disappeared into the house. When she returned, the land papers were in her hands, her voice low and tired. Think carefully before you use capital to make money. He took them with both hands, bowing slightly, hiding the tremor in his grip. In that moment, the paper weighed more than land. It carried her trust, her fear, and the quiet hope that maybe he was right. The loan shop was tucked in a narrow alley, its dim sign flickering under the weight of dust and years. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale cigarettes and paper. He placed the land papers on the table like a gambler laying down his final bet. The man behind the desk, sharp eyes, slow hands, flipped through the documents without hurry. 3 days, the lender said flatly. Principal and interest. Fail, and the house is mine. He nodded, his mouth forming promises faster than his mind could believe them. When the cash slid across the table, it felt warm, alive, as if it might breathe hope back into his life. He tucked it deep into his jacket, already hearing the clink of beer glasses in his mind. Minutes later, he was at a small roadside tavern with his friend, the night buzzing with cheap neon and the low hum of chatter. They spoke in half-whispers over sweating cans of beer, numbers dancing between them like secret codes. His friend suggested new bets, 83, 86, as if they carried a different kind of magic. He agreed, the money spilling into the lottery like water poured into dry sand. By the time the results came, the air in the tavern had turned heavy. 85 appeared on the board, mocking him. No 86, no salvation. His stomach sank, cold and hollow. The rest of his bets fell, one by one, until the table was littered with nothing but crumpled slips and the bitter taste of loss. The friend leaned closer, voice low, telling him about seeing Tu Na's daughter with a man who reeked of wealth. A spark lit in his eyes, not of love, but of opportunity. He leaned back, the decision sharp in his chest. He would find her. Night had begun to thicken over the streets when they set out, the motorbike cutting through pockets of shadow and street lamp light. His friend led the way, weaving between the slow hum of traffic until the city's noise faded into the quieter breath of the countryside. The road narrowed, lined with fences and patches of wild grass, the smell of damp soil rising with the evening air. They stopped outside a wide stretch of farmland, where the lights of a small house glowed faintly in the distance. "She's in there," his friend murmured, nodding towards the gate. He could almost taste the plan forming. Go in with a soft voice, weave regret into charm, and pull her into giving what he needed. But beneath the thin layer of rehearsed apology, another thought coiled tight. If she refused, he'd have to push harder. The image of her child flashed through his mind, not with warmth, but as leverage. The kind of threat he didn't want to name out loud. He told his friend to wait outside, squaring his shoulders before stepping toward the gate. The farm smelled of grass and wood, and for a fleeting second, it felt almost peaceful. But his pulse was loud in his ears, pounding with the weight of debt and the ticking clock of the lender's deadline. Inside, he could already hear the soft scrape of work being done. Somewhere in the stillness, Tu Na was unaware that the footsteps approaching weren't bringing peace, but the shadow of a bargain she would never willingly make. Tu Na looked up from her work, the soft rustle of leaves around her breaking as his shadow fell across the path. For a heartbeat, her eyes widened. Surprise, then guarded distance. He stepped closer, voice low, weaving contrition into each syllable. "I've been looking for you. I know I was wrong. Let me make it right." She didn't move. The quiet between them was taut, like a rope pulled from both ends. He spoke of regret, of wanting to take care of her and the child. But when her expression didn't soften, the tone shifted. His words sharpened, the mask slipping. "If you don't help me, if you don't give me the money, I'll take your child." The air seemed to freeze. Her hands clenched at her sides, though her voice stayed steady. "You have no place here. Leave." The tremor in her breath betrayed the fear coiling inside, but she stood firm. He took a step closer, the heat of his desperation pressing in. His eyes were no longer pleading. They were calculating, weighing her resistance against his need. The sound of his own heartbeat roared in his ears, until another voice cut through it. From behind, Alex's tone was calm, but edged with steel. "Who are you? And why are you here?" The shift was immediate. Her shoulders eased just enough to let out a breath, while his stiffened. Alex's presence was quiet but solid, like a wall he hadn't anticipated. And for the first time that night, he felt the ground beneath his plan begin to crack. Alex stepped forward, the gravel crunching under his boots, eyes fixed on the man before him. "This is my farm. She works here. If you've come to harass her, you leave now." His voice wasn't raised, but it carried the weight of something immovable. The man straightened, forcing a scoff. "She's my wife. This is between us." Alex's reply was steady, each word deliberate. "Husband or not, threatening to take her child is crossing a line. If you set foot here again, I'll take this to the police." Tuna's gaze shifted between them, her breath caught in the stillness. She had stood against her ex-husband's pressure alone, but Alex's presence tilted the balance. Her ex's smirk faltered. The farm felt larger now, each tree and fence post silently standing with Alex. The man's voice hardened. "Fine. Remember my face. I'll be back." His eyes lingered on Tuna, a final flash of warning, before he turned and strode toward the gate. The sound of his retreat faded, replaced by the quiet pulse of the night insects. Alex waited until the man's silhouette dissolved into the dark. Only then did he turn to her, his tone softer. "Are you all right?" She nodded, though her fingers still trembled faintly. "If he comes back, tell me immediately," Alex said. "You won't have to face him alone." She met his eyes for a moment, just long enough for the weight of unspoken gratitude to pass between them. They lingered in the yard as the weight of the confrontation began to dissolve into the quiet rhythm of work. Alex set his jacket aside, picking up tools without asking. Tuna protested at first, her voice calm but firm, insisting she could handle the repairs on her own. Yet his quiet persistence, measured steps, no grand gestures, slowly dissolved her resistance. Soon, they were working side by side, their movements falling into an unspoken cadence. The scrape of wood, the steady thud of nails, and the soft rustle of leaves became the only soundtrack to their shared silence. Every so often, her eyes drifted toward the gate, scanning for a shadow that might return. Alex noticed these small glances. He didn't ask, didn't pry. Instead, he adjusted his position, moving closer when she carried something heavy, his presence forming a silent shield. Words between them were scarce, but in their place was a steady, grounding energy, one that anchored her more than she realized. The calm was interrupted by the sharp trill of his phone. He stepped aside to answer, his tone clipped and professional. After a brief exchange, he ended the call and returned to her, his expression thoughtful. "I have to take care of something at the company," he said, lingering for a moment longer. Then, his gaze locked with hers. "If he comes back, tell me. Don't wait. Don't face him alone." She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you." Two simple words, but they carried the weight of years spent defending herself, without anyone to lean on. Watching him walk toward the gate, she felt a strange sense of safety trail behind him, like a faint light that lingers after a candle is blown out. When his footsteps faded into the distance, the stillness of the evening returned. The crickets hummed in the grass, the air cooling as night pressed closer. She turned back to her work, tools heavy in her hands, but the fear that had clung to her all day felt lighter now, somewhere between the silence and the first stars pricking the sky. Tu Na understood something she had resisted for a long time. Some battles were never meant to be fought alone. And that's how one quiet evening at the farm turned into a turning point in Tu Na's life. Sometimes, the real strength doesn't come from standing alone, but from letting someone stand with you. Will her ex-husband return to make good on his threats? And if he does, will Alex be there in time? Only time will tell. If you want to follow the rest of this journey, full of emotion, tension, and unexpected turns, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Together, let's reach 1,000 followers and keep these stories alive.